Full House, 1987 to 1995, was more than just a wholesome family sitcom. It was a defining part of 90s pop culture, bringing joy and laughter to millions of viewers around the world. With its lovable characters, unforgettable catchphrases, and feel-good storylines, the show became a symbol of warmth, unity, and childhood nostalgia. But behind the scenes, not everything was as picture-perfect as it seemed. Over the years, several beloved cast members have faced heartbreaking struggles, and some have tragically passed away, leaving behind a legacy filled with both light and loss. In this video, we remember the Full House stars we've lost, exploring the emotional and sometimes shocking stories behind their untimely deaths. Bob Saget was born on May 17, 1956, and took on the role of Danny Tanner in Full House in 1987 at the age of 31. Danny was the perfect TV dad, obsessively neat, deeply affectionate, and always armed with a corny life lesson. Audiences embraced him as America's most lovable widowed father, but the man behind the clean-cut image led a life filled with contradictions and unspoken tragedy. Born into a family haunted by death, two of his siblings died young. Saget grew up in a house that rarely talked about grief. Behind the laughs, he wrestled with profound survivor's guilt. As a teenager, he was awkward and often bullied for being too tall and too sensitive. His early dreams of becoming a doctor crumbled under pressure, and he turned to comedy as a lifeline. Though Full House brought him fame, his edgy stand-up act, laced with raunchy jokes and gallows humor, shocked many fans. Some critics called it a betrayal of his family-friendly persona, and ABC executives reportedly warned him repeatedly to tone it down to avoid public backlash. The biggest professional blow came after Full House was canceled. His failed sitcom Raising Dad and directorial flop Dirty Work nearly derailed his career entirely. Personally, he was married twice, with his first marriage ending in a bitter divorce. His daughters were reportedly distant during some periods, due to his emotionally volatile years. He lost his sister Gay to scleroderma, which broke him deeply and pushed him into activism, but also led to depression and periods of heavy drinking. On January 9, 2022, he was found dead in a Florida hotel room from blunt head trauma caused by an accidental fall. He was 65. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $50 million, largely from decades of sitcom success, America's Funniest Home Videos, touring, and Is How I Met Your Mother narration. But close friends later revealed he'd been quietly battling physical exhaustion and regret over the many unresolved tensions in his private life. A brilliant comic who, even in laughter, was often grieving. John Aprea was born on March 4, 1944, and took on the role of Nick Katsopoulos in Full House in 1988 at the age of 44. As Jesse's old-school Greek father, Nick brought comic tension to the Tanner household with his traditionalist views, thick Mediterranean accent, and open disapproval of modern parenting. Audiences embraced him as a lovable, gruff patriarch, but the man behind the character was far more complicated. Aprea grew up in a volatile home in Englewood, New Jersey, where his father was a factory worker with a gambling addiction and his mother a housemaid who often disappeared for days. John turned to street hustling in his teens, briefly associating with small-time mobsters before pivoting to modeling and acting. Though his breakout came with The Godfather Part 2, he struggled to escape the typecasting of tough guy with suit, leading to deep frustration and a period of heavy alcohol abuse in the late 70s. He was fired from a role in a major soap opera after a drunken outburst on set, a scandal buried by a sympathetic producer. His 3 marriages, each ending in bitter, tabloid fodder divorces, earned him a reputation for being both a heartbreaker and a control freak. One ex-wife accused him of emotional manipulation and isolating behavior, while a daughter from his first marriage later revealed they hadn't spoken for over a decade. In 1996, Aprea was briefly sued by a former assistant for alleged verbal harassment and unpaid wages, though the case was settled quietly. Despite these setbacks, he kept a steady presence in TV and film, often playing father figures or mob-adjacent characters. His later years were marked by declining health and limited mobility, yet he refused to slow down, still attending conventions and fan expos well into his 80s. Aprea died on August 5, 2024, in Los Angeles of natural causes at age 80. At the time of his death, he owned 2 properties in California and held residual income from decades of screen work, with a net worth estimated between $3 to $5 million. Though he wore a warm smile in interviews, many who knew him recalled a man haunted by familial trauma, a need for control, and a relentless pursuit of relevance. Marsha Wallace was born on November 1st, 1942, and took on the role of Mrs. Carruthers in Full House in 1993 at the age of 51. As the wildly enthusiastic and slightly unhinged school librarian, she lit up the screen with offbeat humor and chaotic energy. Her character's loud obsession with the Tanner children, especially Michelle, created memorable comic relief that lingered in the hearts of viewers. But behind the laughter, Wallace's life was marked by hidden pain and scars she rarely let the world see. Born in Crushen, Iowa, to a deeply religious and emotionally distant family, Marsha lost her father in a car accident during her teens. With her mother emotionally unavailable and often verbally abusive, Wallace developed bulimia at 16, a condition she struggled with for decades. Though she eventually became a beloved TV icon, her early years in Hollywood were brutal. Agents rejected her for being too loud, too tall, too weird. Despite landing roles on The Bob Newhart Show and The Simpsons, Wallace was repeatedly blacklisted by producers who found her difficult, particularly during her battles with depression and erratic mood swings brought on by medication for breast cancer treatment. Her biggest professional setback came when she was abruptly fired from a stage production in 1989 after allegedly screaming at the director during rehearsals. In her personal life, tragedy struck hard. Her husband, Dennis Hawley, died suddenly of pancreatic cancer in 1992, leaving her to raise their adopted son alone. Struggling with grief, Wallace leaned on antidepressants and alcohol, something she would later admit in her memoir, "Don't Look Back, We're Not Going That Way." Despite her fame, she lived modestly in a small Los Angeles home and had few close friends due to years of mistrust. On October 25, 2013, she died from pneumonia and sepsis, with breast cancer listed as a contributing factor. She was 70 years old and died in Los Angeles. Her estate, valued at approximately $20 million, included royalties from The Simpsons, voice acting work, real estate holdings, and a trust set up for her son. Ivonne Wilder was born Ivonne Wilder on September 21, 1937, and began portraying Irene Katsopolis on Full House in 1988 at the age of 51. Irene, Jesse's loving but strict mother, brought a refreshing blend of cultural identity and maternal no-nonsense to the show. She was tough, funny, and the moral compass Jesse often resisted but always respected. Off-camera, Wilder lived a life as colorful as any role she played. Raised in the Bronx to Puerto Rican and Cuban parents, her childhood was shaped by poverty and conflict. Her father abandoned the family early on, and Wilder often slept on couches or stayed with relatives while her mother worked multiple jobs. She was fiercely intelligent but dropped out of school at 16 to pursue performance, escaping domestic instability. In the entertainment world, she was known for her versatility, but also for being temperamental and outspoken, traits that sometimes cost her roles. She had a reputation for clashing with directors and was quietly blacklisted from a few studio projects in the 1970s after refusing to play what she called stereotypical Latina caricatures. Though she never reached stardom, she appeared in West Side Story, numerous sitcoms, and later reinvented herself as a painter and sculptor, selling pieces quietly in LA galleries. Her personal life was full of turbulence, married 5 times, including once to a man 20 years her junior, and estranged for years from her only son following a public falling out over finances. She suffered from chronic arthritis and depression in her later years and withdrew from acting altogether. On November 24, 2021, she died peacefully in her Los Angeles home at age 84. Her net worth was estimated at over $700,000, with most of it tied up in modest property and her art. She died largely forgotten by Hollywood, but remembered by those who knew her as a trailblazer who paid dearly for her integrity. Richard Paul, born June 6, 1940, stepped into the role of Mr. Strobridge in Full House in 1988 at age 48, playing the bumbling but endearing TV station manager where Danny Tanner hosted Wake Up San Francisco. Though a minor character, Strobridge added workplace chaos and light satire to the otherwise domestic comedy. Off-screen, Paul was one of the most academically accomplished cast members, holding a master's degree in psychology and having nearly completed a PhD before abandoning academia for acting. But behind the public image of intellect and kindness, his life was marked by inner conflict and unspoken darkness. Raised in a conservative Catholic household in Los Angeles, Richard struggled with his sexual identity for most of his life. According to close friends, he lived as a closeted gay man during an era when being out in Hollywood meant career suicide. The secrecy took its toll, fueling years of isolation and depression that he concealed beneath his comedic personas. His long-term partner of 15 years, a theater director, was never publicly acknowledged, and Paul reportedly rewrote his will several times under pressure from estranged family members. Although he had no major Hollywood scandals, Paul often complained privately about being passed over for serious roles due to his goofy face, and once accused a studio exec of blackballing him after rejecting unwanted advances, a claim he never pursued legally. In the mid-1990s, he was quietly battling cancer while still performing in sitcoms and voice work, never letting on how much pain he was in. On Christmas Day, in 1998, he died in Studio City at age 58, alone in hospice care. His modest estate, valued around $1 million, included a small condo, several vintage cars, and a trust for animal welfare causes. Though he left behind no biological family, several colleagues credited him posthumously for their own emotional healing, noting his quiet generosity and empathetic nature. Paul's legacy remains that of a gentleman who lived in silence too long, his brilliance often dimmed by Hollywood's narrow gaze. Alice Herson was born on March 10, 1929, and joined Full House in 1987 at the age of 58, portraying Claire Tanner, Danny's warm, steady, and emotionally grounding mother. Her appearances were sparse but deeply memorable, especially during the show's early episodes dealing with the Tanner family's grief. Yet Herson's own early life was filled with instability and silence. Raised in a cold Manhattan apartment by two emotionally detached parents, she described her childhood as a masterclass in loneliness. Her father, a failed businessman, drank quietly and often, while her mother, obsessed with status, disapproved of Alice's theatrical ambitions. Though she found early success on Broadway, she spent much of the 1960s and 70s cast in roles she resented, wealthy, grieving widows or nagging wives. In reality, Herson's life mirrored some of that misery. Her first marriage ended in scandal when she allegedly walked in on her husband with a young stage assistant. Her second marriage, to actor Stephen Elliott, was outwardly stable but plagued by rumors of infidelity on both sides. Those close to the couple whispered about explosive fights and long silences that could stretch for weeks. Though Alice maintained a reputation for grace on set, she reportedly had a cutting tongue and a habit of dismissing younger actresses as lightweights. Her career slowed dramatically in the 2000s, and she grew bitter about the roles no longer coming her way, even lashing out during a 2008 panel interview where she accused modern TV of celebrating ignorance. She lost both her sons within a decade, one to suicide, the other to a drug overdose, tragedies that haunted her final years. On February 14, 2025, Herson died of natural causes in Los Angeles at the age of 95. Despite her immense emotional losses, she left behind an estate estimated at $2 to $3 million, including royalties from television syndication, savings from her Broadway years, and a modest apartment in West Hollywood. Luis Avalos, born on September 2, 1946, portrayed Mr. Santana in Full House in 1989 at the age of 43. Though his appearance was brief, he brought a sharp wit and cultural flavor to a largely homogeneous cast, subtly challenging the show's lack of Latin representation. Viewers remember him as the no-nonsense yet funny school administrator, but few knew the turbulent path that shaped his poise. Born in Havana under a repressive regime, Avalos fled Cuba as a teen, torn from his roots and arriving in the U.S. with no money and fractured English. He concealed this dislocation for years, even faking an American accent to land early roles. Despite earning an MFA from NYU, the acting world offered little dignity. He was often cast as drug dealers or janitors. The real scandal came in the late 70s, when he clashed with producers on the Electric Company over what he saw as cultural tokenism. Though beloved by viewers, he nearly walked away from the show mid-season, frustrated by the industry's hypocrisy. Colleagues praised his brilliance, but quietly noted his fierce temper and a reputation for snapping at less prepared actors. His personal life was marked by instability. A long-term relationship with a stage manager ended abruptly after infidelity rumors, and he never married. Friends say he struggled with loneliness in later years, retreating into his nonprofit work to cope with aging and Hollywood's growing indifference. Luis Avalos died on January 22, 2014, in Burbank, California, from heart failure after a heart attack at the age of 67. His net worth at the time of death was estimated between $1 to $2 million, mostly tied to modest real estate holdings and educational grants. Despite the respect he earned, his legacy remains tragically undercelebrated, just like the man himself, always fighting for visibility in a system designed to keep him unseen. James Hampton, born on July 9, 1936, played Mr. Malatesta in Full House in 1989 at the age of 53. As the bumbling driving instructor who oversaw DJ Tanner's lessons, his character's short screen time left a lasting comedic impression, bringing both chaos and charm to one of the show's most relatable teenage milestones. But behind the gentle laugh lines was a man shaped by a tormented childhood. Growing up in a strict Baptist household in Oklahoma, James faced emotional neglect and physical punishment that scarred his sense of self. His attempts at expressing emotion were routinely punished, pushing him to mask his pain behind humor, something that followed him into every performance. While his filmography paints a picture of a steady career, his private battles were far less smooth. Hampton suffered years of being typecast and humiliated by producers who dismissed him as a TV clown, which he later confessed led to a deep depression in the early 80s. His professional low point came during an ill-fated directorial debut in the 1990s, which was shelved by the studio after a disastrous test screening, destroying his confidence for years. Despite being known as a mentor, some insiders whispered about his volatile moods on set and an obsessive control streak that alienated collaborators. His marriage to actress Mary Dees was riddled with unspoken tension, marked by long separations and their decision to live in separate states in later years. Hampton lost both his brother and best friend within months of each other in the early 2000s, events that pushed him into spiritual isolation. He died on April 7, 2021, in Fort Worth, Texas, from complications related to Parkinson's disease at the age of 84. His estate included Texas ranch land, residuals from decades of television work, and personal writings never published. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $14 million, but his quiet inner suffering rarely matched the warmth he projected to fans. Don Hood was born on November 25, 1940, and played Kenneth Donaldson in Full House in 1991 at the age of 51. Though his role was limited to a single episode, his presence brought a sobering gravity that momentarily broke the show's usual bubble of sugary optimism. Playing Jesse's uncle, Hood's character touched on generational tension and legacy, topics rarely explored deeply in the series. Yet behind the camera, Don Hood's own life was one of quiet torment and professional frustration. Born in the deep poverty of rural Mississippi, his father abandoned the family when Don was a toddler. Raised by a mother who cycled through abusive relationships, Don was often beaten and humiliated by a rotating cast of father figures. As a child, he developed a stutter and learned early to suppress his feelings, masking pain behind forced charm. His acting career was built slowly and without fanfare. Despite respectable credits, Hood remained typecast in forgettable roles: lawyers, uncles, background businessmen. One of his most crushing career disappointments came in the late 80s, when he was cast in a major supporting role for Steel Magnolias, but was abruptly cut during final rewrites, an event that sent him into a deep depression. Known to retreat into silence between takes, Hood often clashed with more extroverted directors who labeled him difficult. Though no scandals ever surfaced publicly, several peers privately described his drinking as problematic, and rumors circulated about a long-term affair with a younger co-star during his theater days. His personal life was marked by short-lived relationships and a failed marriage to a former model, whom he reportedly left after an explosive argument involving infidelity accusations. Estranged from his only child, Hood spent his final years in Baton Rouge battling prostate cancer, alone and increasingly forgotten. He died on March 20, 2003, at the age of 62. At the time of his death, he owned little more than a modest home and a used Cadillac. His estate was valued at just under $1 million, a stark contrast to the decades he spent chasing relevance in an industry that never fully welcomed him. Phyllis Diller was born on July 17, 1917, and made her Full House appearance in 1988 at the age of 71, portraying an exaggerated version of herself, bursting into the Tanner household with trademark cackles, feather boas, and chaotic comedic flair. She stole the scene with her unapologetic eccentricity, just as she had in the world of comedy, where she bulldozed her way into a male-dominated space with savage wit and theatrical bravado. But the laughter she elicited hid a lifetime of pain. Born into a cold and abusive home in Lima, Ohio, Diller grew up with a mother who constantly belittled her and a father who turned a blind eye. Her early adult life was no easier. She endured a psychologically abusive marriage to Sherwood Diller, raising 5 children while suppressing her own ambitions. She didn't perform stand-up until age 37, a career she began as an escape from domestic despair. Behind her famous jokes about her fictional husband Fong and her hideous looks was real self-loathing, driving her to undergo over 15 plastic surgeries. She was addicted to transformation, not just cosmetic but emotional. She struggled with chronic loneliness, often writing letters to herself to feel heard. Despite being beloved by Johnny Carson and adored by her peers, Diller was notorious for being on at all times, rarely letting people see the woman behind the wig. Her biggest heartbreak was the death of her daughter Stephanie from a stroke in 2002, which led to her withdrawal from public life. She died of natural causes on August 20, 2012 at 95, in her Los Angeles home at the age of 95. At the time of her death, her estate was worth an estimated $15 million, amassed through stand-up tours, voiceover work, best-selling books, and clever real estate investments. Though she shattered glass ceilings in comedy, Diller remained a woman split between spectacle and sorrow, an icon of laughter who battled demons she never joked about. Michelle Nicastro was born on March 31, 1960, and appeared in Full House in 1987 at the age of 27, playing Roxana, a vibrant, flirtatious character who brought youthful zest and lighthearted charm to the episode Sea Cruise. Her brief appearance left an impression, thanks to her magnetic smile and infectious energy. But while Roxana exuded carefree fun, Michelle's real life was far more complex and in many ways, quietly heartbreaking. Raised in Washington, D.C., in a socially conservative household, Michelle grew up with an emotionally absent father and a mother obsessed with appearances. Her early years were marked by pressure to be perfect, thin, pretty, accomplished, which laid the foundation for years of insecurity masked by dazzling performance. Though she found moderate success on Broadway, and as the voice of Princess Odette in The Swan Princess, Nicastro struggled behind the scenes with anxiety and imposter syndrome. Friends recall her disappearing for days between gigs, plagued by doubts about her talent and self-worth. Her albums, though critically praised, sold poorly, a bitter disappointment for someone trained in classical voice. The darkest period in her career came in the late 90s when a major network sitcom audition spiraled into allegations of favoritism and political interference. Nicastro was dropped without explanation, and insiders said she was devastated and began avoiding live auditions altogether. Her marriage to producer Steve Stark appeared idyllic, but privately, she battled depression and an intense fear of becoming irrelevant in an industry that rarely forgives aging actresses. Diagnosed with breast cancer in the early 2000s, she fought silently, refusing public sympathy even as the disease spread to her brain. She died on November 4, 2010, in Los Angeles at the age of 50. At the time of her death, her estate was valued at $1 to $2 million, including residuals from animated work, music royalties, and joint investments with her husband. Eddie Barth was born on September 29, 1931, and played Lou, the gruff boxing promoter, in Full House in 1987 at age 56. Though he appeared in just one episode, Lou's gritty persona clashed deliciously with the show's polished tone, leaving a lasting impression on fans who welcomed the rougher energy he brought. Behind that signature gravel voice, nicknamed Mr. Gravel by the industry, was a man forged in hardship. Barth grew up in South Philadelphia amid street violence and crushing poverty. His father was an alcoholic longshoreman who vanished when Eddie was 10, leaving the family destitute. He sold newspapers to help his mother pay rent and was beaten often by neighborhood bullies for his stutter, a condition he overcame through sheer force of will, ironically becoming a master of voiceover. Despite a strong start in theater, Eddie faced brutal typecasting. Studios only saw him as a tough guy, and he was repeatedly passed over for nuanced roles. The darkest blow came in the 1970s when he was publicly fired from a primetime series after a bitter feud with the showrunner over creative control, an event that blacklisted him for nearly a decade. Though many saw Barth as reliable, some co-stars described him as paranoid, obsessed with loyalty, and fiercely territorial on set. His marriage to actress Sally Hatta was complicated by rumors of infidelity and long separations during voiceover gigs, with insiders claiming he often prioritized work over his family. In his final years, Barth struggled with chronic illness and financial tension from failed investments in a short-lived voiceover agency. He died on May 28, 2010, in Los Angeles, California, from heart failure at the age of 78. His estate, including a modest home in Studio City and residuals from commercials and television work, was valued between $2 to $3 million. While he was never a household name, his unmistakable voice echoed through decades of American pop culture, a gritty legacy shaped by battles few ever saw. Jack Crushen was born on March 20, 1922, and joined Full House in 1990 at the age of 68 as Iorgos Katsopoulos, Jesse's grandfather. In just a single episode, Papoulis became an unforgettable figure. His old-world Greek charm, heartfelt wisdom, and bittersweet farewell in The Last Dance remains one of the most emotional moments in the entire series. But while Papoulis preached about tradition and family unity, Crushen's own life was a patchwork of quiet chaos and professional frustration. Born to Russian Jewish immigrants in Canada, his early childhood was steeped in instability. His family moved frequently, and his father's string of failed businesses forced Jack to work as a teenager just to help put food on the table. Though he began as a radio actor, Crushen found early success elusive. In Hollywood, he was pigeonholed into ethnic roles, Greek, Italian, Jewish. Despite his versatility, he was famously snubbed for several leading parts due to his accent and looks, including being passed over for a major role in The Godfather, which he considered the most painful professional loss of his life. Off-camera, Crushen was intense and uncompromising. Some directors found him prickly and hard to direct, especially in later years when he was more outspoken about ageism in Hollywood. Married 3 times, his second marriage ended in scandal when court documents revealed financial infidelity and allegations of verbal abuse, though he denied them. His final years were marked by declining health and growing resentment over being largely forgotten by the industry he gave everything to. On April 2, 2002, he passed away in Chandler, Arizona, at age 80. His estate, worth an estimated $2 to $3 million, included royalties, investments in theater productions, and a modest Arizona property. Despite decades of work, Crushen died without a Hollywood tribute, his legacy buried under the weight of typecasting and an industry that never gave him the spotlight he earned. Lois Nettleton was born on August 16, 1927, and joined Full House in 1991 at age 64, portraying Nedra Donaldson, a role that brought brief elegance and maternal poise to the series. Her character, graceful and composed, seemed to float above the chaos of the Tanner household, embodying a bygone era of dignity. Yet Nettleton's real life was far from tranquil. Born in Oak Park, Illinois, she was a beauty pageant queen who won Miss Chicago in 1948, but behind the crown was a girl raised by a mother who discouraged emotional expression and a father who, she later hinted in interviews, was emotionally distant and possibly abusive. Lois's early acting success masked deep insecurity and perfectionism that drove her to anxiety and obsessive behavior on set. Her career saw brilliant highs, Emmy wins, Broadway acclaim, but was punctuated by professional betrayals and personal chaos. The biggest wound came in the form of her marriage to famed humorist Gene Shepard, whose biting sarcasm and emotional manipulation left her deeply scarred. The couple divorced after 7 volatile years. Nettleton never remarried and reportedly refused to even mention his name later in life. Friends spoke of her loneliness, her tendency to drink alone, and her estrangement from family. Though she had no children, she became fiercely attached to her dogs, once canceling a press tour when one fell ill. Her most devastating career setback came when she was abruptly replaced in a lead television role due to creative differences, though insiders cited tension with producers over script rewrites and Nettleton's insistence on control. She battled lung cancer in silence and refused a public announcement until the disease had progressed beyond treatment. On January 18, 2008, she died in Woodland Hills, California, at the age of 80. At her death, her assets included a Brentwood condo, several pieces of vintage jewelry, and royalties from voiceover work. Her net worth was estimated between $3 to $5 million, a quiet fortune amassed not through celebrity, but through a lifetime of work that often demanded more from her soul than it gave back in return. Andre Rosie Brown was born on February 7, 1956, and made his Full House appearance in 1993 at age 37 as Weeb, a minor yet unforgettable character whose towering presence and comedic instinct left a lasting impression. Known for his 6 feet 7 inches frame, Brown was the kind of actor casting directors loved for physical impact, but rarely for depth. Off-screen, however, he lived many lives. A 14-year veteran of law enforcement, a youth football coach, and a jazz drummer whose playing stunned anyone lucky enough to hear him. But Brown's childhood was no easy path. Raised in a violent neighborhood of Rockford, Illinois, His father abandoned the family when Andre was just 10. He often found refuge in music, hiding his notebooks of poetry and jazz lyrics under his bed, afraid he'd be mocked. Acting came late. Only after injuries ended his sports dreams and a bureaucratic nightmare forced him out of the police force under murky circumstances involving excessive force complaints that were never fully substantiated nor publicly cleared. Despite his intimidating appearance, he was known to castmates as gentle and introspective, though some claimed he struggled with depression in his final years, particularly after a string of typecast roles and repeated rejections from more nuanced parts. His career never took off as hoped. He was the big guy in nearly every appearance, and despite friendships with stars, he remained on the fringe. He died on July 18, 2006, in Northridge, California, after a short illness at age 50. His net worth was under $1 million, much of it in small SAG residuals and part-time coaching income. Still, his impact on his community, mentoring kids in underserved neighborhoods, became his most profound legacy. Hollywood barely noticed his passing, but in Rockford, murals were painted in his honor, not as a TV character, but as a gentle giant who tried to lift others even when his own dreams went unfulfilled. Thank you for watching as we reflected on the lives and legacies of the actors from Full House who are no longer with us. Their humor, charm, and unforgettable performances brought joy to millions and helped shape the show into a classic. While their journeys ended far too soon, their impact lives on through every scene, every laugh, and every memory they've left behind. As we honor their lives, we're reminded of how deeply television can touch our hearts. Join us next time as we look back at more stars who left us too soon, but whose stories continue to shine.